The scripture today is Mark 13, starting with verse 14, NIV version. Here we go. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down or enter the house or take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful will it be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers? Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress, unequaled from the beginning, when God created the world, and until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. And at that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "Look, there he is," do not believe it. For Christ's sake, false prophets will appear and perform signs and miracles to deceive the elect, if that were possible. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. But in those days, following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, men will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth and to the ends of heavens. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know the summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass. No one knows about the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with his assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether it is in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch.
Well, we're in the worst of times, part 2, because after I got halfway through the sermon last week, I realized, I can't cover all of this in one Sunday. You could probably spend a lifetime on this particular chapter. I'm sure there's probably been some scholars who have. They're amazingly in-depth when it comes to these kinds of things. We talked last week about whether or not it was the end of their world or whether it was the end of the world. I like that phrase, because there are times we need to know that Jesus is the shelter in a weary land, a rock in which we can hide, a bulwark never failing, when it's just our world that is collapsing. On the other hand, we need to know that there will be a time when Jesus Christ will return, and it will be the world that will be collapsing. And it is sometimes difficult to sort through all the different threads of prophecy that go through these. And one of the key things that I think we need to keep in mind is illustrated by what happened with Isaiah. Isaiah prophesied that the people of Israel would go into captivity in Babylon, and then he also prophesied that they would come back out of captivity. And he said, in telling them that they would come back out of captivity, that on their way back the rivers would dry up, and they would have a smooth shot all the way back to Israel, and it would just be wonderful. Now, it came time, a couple hundred years later, for the Israelites to go back. King Cyrus had said, "Go, you can go home." You know, I wouldn't doubt that there were some believers there who sat there and said, "No, we're waiting for the river to dry up. You know, and we're not going to go until every part of my particular philosophy of prophecy, my particular interpretation of what Isaiah had to say, is completed before I will leave the land of Babylon and go back to Israel." Well, that part of that prophecy was never fulfilled literally. You know, I think Isaiah was trying to encourage them and saying, we will get to go back and it will be wonderful and you ought to go. But it wasn't fulfilled the way some of those people thought it was supposed to be fulfilled. And I'm thinking that this means that some of the things that we think are supposed to happen, and in the order that we think that they're going to happen, are not going to be fulfilled the way we want them to be. And we need to let God be free. In fact, Isaiah says that God likes change, that God will answer these promises, He will fulfill these promises, but not necessarily in the way that we think. So if these things that I'm talking about today don't happen the way I talk about them, don't come after me. And don't be mad at God. Because He's going to do what He wants to do, and He will fulfill His promise, and He will do His work. But it will be in His time and in His way. And it may be different than we could ever think about. We just need to be watchful, which is what Jesus is telling us here in Mark chapter 13. This is still continuing on in this section, which deals mostly with what happened to Judah and Jerusalem and the temple in 70 A.D. A lot of this prophecy that we look at today had fulfillment at that time. But there are woven into that some strands that we can't quite place and don't quite fit. And so we have this warning here in verse 14, starting in verse 14, about wars and rumors and wars. I think that there is supposed to be in this chapter a near and far fulfillment. Some of these prophecies, I think, are fulfilled in phases or in steps. This one that Jesus is talking about today, and what he quotes is from Daniel. And so in Daniel, Daniel says that this is talking about the end of the world. But Jesus is applying it to the end of Jerusalem, to the end of the temple. Some of these things have to be to deal with the end of Jerusalem and the temple. What meaning could the command to flee Judea have for someone who doesn't live there? If it's the end of the world, do we all need to move to Judea so that we can all leave? Are we supposed to be there at that time and then we'll leave? You know, or the command to people who are anxious about getting their garments and valuables. Who would worry about that if we're going to go to heaven? Oh, Jesus, I got to get my money.